Good morning, class. So today we are going to talk about writing equations of circles. Now, this is a good segue for Unit 5 simply because last unit we talked about circles as well as volume, but since circles are still fresh in our minds, let's continue talking about that for Unit 5 to start. So, the standard form of the equation of a circle is, and you might look at it thinking, what is going on? But I will break it down. It's x minus h quantity squared plus y minus k quantity squared equals r squared. Okay, so where x and y is never going to change. It'll just be x minus something, y minus something. So we have an h and a k. Well, hk is an ordered pair. hk is going to tell us what the center of the circle is. Okay, hk will tell us the coordinates of the center of the circle. And r is the radius. So, it says, write each circle equation in standard form with the given information. So there's different scenarios. Notice it says set 1, set 2, set 3, and there's one on the back as well of this paper. So first off, let's just understand how to use this equation. So given the center and radius, or diameter. Okay, so they gave me the center, which is my hk, and they gave me the radius, my r. So this is what I suggest you do. I would write x minus, leave a blank, squared, plus y minus, leave a blank, squared, equals the radius squared. Well, the radius they tell me in this problem. So for number 1, the radius is 2, so it would be 2 squared. So now I'm going to plug in my center into these blanks. Now notice it is subtracting because it is already subtracting in the equation. So if I subtract a positive 5, think of multiplying integers. A negative times a positive stays a negative. So I just put 5 in its place. Again, subtracting a positive, so a negative times a positive stays a negative. So it's just like I'm just plugging in place. I'm plugging it in. And here, 2 squared is 4. So on a quiz, which will be coming up in a couple weeks, make sure that you simplify your radius squared. I would accept this if I was giving you a hard copy quiz, but I do want you to know that if we had the EOC this year, or on your quiz in Illuminate, which is an online quiz, look for it simplified. Let's look at another one. Let's look number 3. Number 3, they give me the center, and now they give me diameter. So if the diameter is 18, so recall, we have a circle. Diameter goes through the center of the circle. Say C for center. So if the diameter is 18, well, I want the radius. So I take half of 18, because radius plus the radius gives me my diameter. So half of 18 is 9. So we have our radius now. Okay, so I'm going to do the same technique. X minus blank squared plus y minus blank squared equals, we found our radius because this time they gave us diameter, 9 squared, which would be 81. Okay, now here is where we have some little differences. Notice now we have negative numbers. So notice if I subtract a negative times a negative is a positive. My k, if I subtract a negative 11, it becomes positive. So what's happening is, notice when it was 5, 3, well, in the equation it's -5, -3. When they're both negative, it's the opposite sign, +2, +11. So that's one way to think of it as, is that you swap the signs, change the signs when you put it into the formula. So if these are positive, notice now they're negative, subtraction. These are both negative, so then I swap it, it becomes plus, positive. Let's try one more and have you try the other 3. So number 5, I'm going to do the same thing. So I have x minus blank squared plus y minus blank squared. And then we need, the radius. Now here, the diameter is square root of 47. So for this, I think they made a boo-boo because that's not going to come out pretty. So we're going to make this the radius. Okay, so the radius is square root of 47. Okay, the radius. So I'm giving you the radius. So I just want to kind of go over here to the side. So if I have square root of 47 as my radius, and I square it because of radius squared, well, it's square root of 47 squared. If I put this in my calculator, I get 47. Why? Well, the opposite of square rooting is squaring. So this squared cancels out or unleashes the 47 to be by itself. So now it would be equal to 47. Now if you wrote square root of 47 quantity squared, I'd accept that. But recognize again, in the quiz that's upcoming, make sure it's simplified. Okay? Alright, now let's plug in our center. I have a -4 and a 0. So that means if I subtract a negative, it becomes a +4. And I just put 0 in its place for the y minus the k value. Now, how you can also write this down is, you could also, and you would also see this happen on a test or a quiz. Well, y minus 0 or y minus nothing is still just y squared. Okay, I could expand this and use FOIL, and I would just get y squared equals 47. Okay? All right. Now, I know that was a lot to kind of chunk and chew, but I want you to please try, pause the video, and try 2, 4, and 6. Give it a try. And also, I just want to say that for number 6, again, that's radius, not diameter. Okay, so number 6, they're giving you radius. So pause and give that a whirl. All right, so for number 2, notice now they're kind of mixing it up. You've got a negative and a positive value for your center. So I'm going to have x plus 1 minus a negative plus y minus 7 squared equals 14 squared, which is 196. Okay, so notice the signs change. They are opposite of each other when you put it into this particular formula. Or, I'm sorry, this particular equation, the standard form. Next one. I see they're giving me diameter, so I take half the diameter and I get 16. So now, if you wrote x minus 0 quantity squared, that is fine. But just be familiar that that means the same as x squared. Because if I'm doing x minus nothing, it's going to stay x squared plus y minus 9 quantity squared equals my radius squared. Well, 16 squared, that gives you 256. For the last one, number 6, we would have x minus 15 quantity squared plus y plus 6, remember opposite, squared, equals, when I take my radius and I square it, radius squared, that's what my formula, or I keep saying formula, but my equation says to do. If I put this in the calculator, it simplifies to just 158. Okay? All right, let's look at another set. Now something different. They're going to give us the center, but now they're giving us now they're giving us circumference and area. So we have the center, but what they're not giving us now is the radius. But I can use this to my advantage to find the radius. So here, if the circumference is 6 pi, well, now it's going back to our knowledge of the formula for circumference. So circumference equals 2 pi r. I'm going to substitute 6 pi in place of c because they gave me circumference. So 6 pi equals 2 pi r. And if I get r by itself, I can divide by 2 pi on both sides. And, go on, Scruff, sorry, my cat's on my lap. If I divide by 2 pi on both sides, the pi's cancel, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So now I know that my radius is 3. So now I have everything I need. I have the center, I have the radius. Now I put it into the standard form of the equation of the circle. Now I know it's a little scrunched in here, so I'm just going to do a little cloud to show the difference between the answers. So I have x minus a negative is plus y minus 4, quantity squared, equals my radius squared. So 3 squared is 9. Okay, so now we're going back to area and circumference of a circle. So if we look at number 9, they gave us the center, but now we have area. Well, area of a circle, the formula is pi r squared. They gave me the area, which is 16 pi equals pi r squared. And if I divide by pi on both sides, notice that right here, I could keep going to find just the radius, but notice r squared is in our standard form for an equation of a circle. So I could just stop here, and I could say, oh, okay, so it's going to be x plus 8, because we're subtracting a negative, plus y minus a negative is plus 11 squared, equals my radius squared. So area is kind of nice. It already has radius squared, so it would be 16. Okay, but if you kept going, you would take the square root, and the square root of 16 is 4. And if I think of 4 squared, it gets me back to 16. Okay, all right, so pause this video and give number 8 and number 10 a try. One where it's circumference and one where they give you area. Okay, try that out. All right, now for number 8, they gave us circumference, 17 pi. I'm going to set that equal to 2 pi r. My circumference equals 2 pi r. If I divide by 2 pi, my radius, what I get from my radius is 8.5. So now I have x minus 9 quantity squared plus y minus 12 quantity squared equals 8.5 squared is 72.25. I ran out of space. So if you got decimals, do not panic. It can happen. Okay, number 10. Area of a circle, I will set equal to pi r squared, because area equals pi r squared. If I divide by pi on both sides, the pi's will cancel, which is so nice. And I could stop here since area is nice how it already has it in r squared for the equation of a circle. So now I'd have x minus 2 quantity squared plus y minus a negative makes a positive. So I like this problem. It shows you the difference between the integers and what happens in the equation. Equals our radius squared, which is 361. Okay. All right. Next one. Okay, number 11. Now, well, 11 and 12. Notice every scenario we need two things. We need the center and the radius. That's it. And then you can write your equation of a circle. So now they're giving us the graph. I see a circle, it's on the graph, so I need to apply my knowledge about the coordinate plane. I need the center of the circle. They're not so nice. They didn't plot the center for us, but we can find it. So if I look from end to end, which that would be the diameter, and let's say I look, notice I'm putting the dots at the very top and side to side. So if I do this, it kind of looks like a bullseye. So now I've found, okay, this is my radius. That center's my radius. Oh my goodness, it's definitely a long day. That center, I can now say is, I'll do C for center. It is 1, 2, 3, negative 2. 3, negative 2. And my radius, so center to any point on the circle. So this is my 0 starting point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you get a radius of 5. And now I've identified the center, I've identified the radius, because remember, definition of radius is center to any point on the circle. So all of these are going to be 5. Now I can write the equation, which would be x minus 3 quantity squared plus y plus 2 quantity squared, because it's opposite, equals 5 squared. 5 squared is 25. Okay? Not too bad, right? You just got to identify the center and radius using your knowledge of the coordinate plane to write your equation. So, now I want you to pause the video and try out number 12. If it helps, draw the way I did. I drew 2 diameters to find the center, and then I could count from the center to any point on the circle and find my radius. All right, so your center is negative 1, positive 3. So center is negative 1, positive 3. And if I count from the center to any point on the circle, I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, make sure I counted that right. Okay, so my radius is 7. So our equation of a circle is x plus 1 quantity squared plus y minus 3 quantity squared equals my radius squared. So 7 squared, 49. Right? Not too bad, right? So now let's look at another one. Set 4. Given the center and a point on the circle. That's interesting. Apparently there's something we need to recall with algebra to do this. So let's say, okay, let's think about this. We're given the center and a point on the circle. So I have my center, but I got to find the radius. Well, I like how they drew this picture. If they give you the center and a point somewhere on the circle, what does that look like? That's the radius. Well, To find the distance between 2 points, I repeat, to find the distance between 2 points, I would use distance formula to get my radius. So let's recall that distance formula is the square root of x2 minus x1 quantity squared plus y2 minus y1 quantity squared. Okay, we'll get to this later. This is all we need. We are given the center and a point on the circle. So I'm going to use the distance formula to see what the distance of the radius is. Then I can write my equation of a circle. All right. Now, D means distance, but I'm just going to write R, or I could write RAD for radius, just to tell myself, okay, I know I'm finding the radius using distance formula. Now, to refresh, remember, let's label everything we need. So we could call the center our x1, y1, and our point on the circle, we could call that x2, y2, and then plug it in to our distance formula. So how I chose to label it, I see it'd be 7 minus 9, subtracting my x's, squared, plus y2 is 4 minus 10 quantity squared. And let's see, 7 minus 9 is negative 2. Negative 2 quantity squared is 4, plus 4 minus 10 is negative 6. But the quantity of negative 6, the parentheses, if you do parenthesis negative 6 squared, you get a positive 36. And we see that the radius is the square root of 40. Okay, and in case some might be scratching their head saying, what are you talking about, Ms. Santiago? Well, 7 minus 9 is negative 2. But we keep this parenthesis and square it. Okay, this is telling me negative 2 times negative 2, which gives me 4. If you put in your calculator this, negative 2 squared, no parentheses, it's telling me to square it and then put the negative in front. That's not how we do it. Parenthesis negative 2, close, squared. You'll always get a positive number when you square. Notice when I squared, I kept getting a positive value. Okay, now we have our center, our radius. Now we can write our equation. So it'd be x, these are both positive numbers, so it'd be x minus 9, the opposite, y minus 10, and the square root of 40 squared. Remember, radius squared, it cancels out and you're left with the whole number 40. Okay, let us do one more together and I will have you try one out. All right, let's see, which one would we like to do? I think we'll do this one, number 14. So they give me center and a point in the circle, so I need distance formula. So I'm going to label center as my first set of coordinates, point on the circle as my second, so x2, y2. And I'm going to find my radius by using distance formula, so I can see the distance between those 2 points. x2 is negative 7 minus 1 quantity squared plus negative 13 minus a negative. Negative 13 minus a negative makes a positive 5 quantity squared. Careful, okay? Careful with your integers. So now we have negative 7 minus 1, so maybe I'll do this way. Negative 7 minus 1 is negative 8, quantity squared, plus negative 13 plus 5, that would give me 8, negative 8, quantity squared. So see how I put parentheses? If I put this in my calculator as you see it, you would get negative 8 quantity squared is 64 plus 64 because they're both the same. And you will get a radius of the square root of 128. So now we have our radius. All right. So now we have the radius, so now we can write our equation. Remember, don't accidentally go to the point on the circle. You need the center and you need your radius to write your equation of a circle. So it's x minus 1 quantity squared plus y minus the negative makes a positive 5 squared. And since this is the square root of 128, square root of 128 squared, radius squared, I like to say unlocks or unleashes the 128 to be by itself. Okay, I would like you to try out number 15. So pause and try this out. We'll go over it and then have you try 16 as well. Okay, so pause and try out 15. All right, so for 15, we would get, for the distance formula, we would get 1 minus 2 quantity squared plus 10 minus the negative makes a positive 6 squared. And if I simplify this, I find out that the radius is the square root of 257. And now I plug in my center and my radius. So I would have x minus 2 quantity squared plus y plus 6 quantity squared. It's a square root, so if I square it, it's just the integer. Okay? All right. Try it out again. Pause the video and try 16. All right, so for number 16, we have the radius. Let's see, my x2 is negative 9 minus the negative makes a positive 2. Whoops. Plus negative 4 minus 0 squared. So we would have negative 7 squared. Notice I'm going a little further in here just in case you need to see it. So we have 49 plus 16, which gives me 50, square root is 65. Okay, so my equation of a circle is x plus 2 quantity squared plus, I see it's going to be 0 here, so y minus 0. I'm just going to write y squared. If you wrote y minus 0 quantity squared, that is fine. But be aware that if you see this as an option for a quiz or an assessment of any kind, that would be the correct answer. Equals the radius squared. So square root of 65 squared is 65. Okay? All right. Okay, so let's go over one last type of scenario. And this one, we are going to need the midpoint formula. So for this, I'm just going to write MP for midpoint. So midpoint means middle. Midpoint means middle. So that's where I add my x's, and I take the average, divide it by 2. Comma, I add the y's, take the average. So that way when I take the average or cut it in half, I then find the middle. Midpoint. Middle. Think about that. Okay? So I'll rewrite this over here for reference. Okay. What we're going to do is one for more space, but also I think what we're going to do is cross out 19 and 20 because I will walk you through number 17, and then have you try out 18, okay? That way we also have more room. I know you're probably thinking, oh boy, here she goes, but bear with me. It says, given the endpoints of a diameter. Endpoints of a diameter. Well, over here has a nice picture. Endpoints. By definition, diameter goes through the center. So if they're giving us, I'll just put boxes here. If they're giving us ordered pairs of the endpoints of a diameter, if I take the midpoint formula to find the middle of the diameter, I get the center. Because notice, this doesn't tell me the center or radius, but I can find it with this to my advantage. This time we got to find both. Earlier you were given both. Then you were given area circumference, you had to find radius. Then you're given center and a point on a circle, and you've got to find the radius. Well, now we've got to find the center and the radius. So here, first we need to find the midpoint, the middle, because that's the center. So here, notice we have x1, y1, x2, y2, so I'm going to label my first one x1, y1, my second ordered pair x2, y2, and let's find the midpoint. So we're going to add our x's together and divide by 2. So I have -10 plus a -14. Could have just said subtract 14. Cut it in half. Comma. Now I have my y's. Cut them in half. Okay, let's simplify this. So -10 minus 14 is -28. Half of -28 is -14. I made a boo-boo on here. Or no, I'm tripping. Sorry, -24. Needs to be Friday. -24. So half of -24 is -12, comma. 1 plus 9 is 10. Half of 10 is 5. So now we have our center. Awesome. Okay, we have our center. That's done. Perfect. So my center, and I'll use this as an example, we found the center to be -12.5. Okay, got the center down. Now we need the radius. But notice, now we have the center and a point on the circle. Both of these are points on the circle, so I could choose either of these to find the radius using distance formula. So I could use, we could say this is -14.1, gets me the radius. I could use -10.9, center and a point. That would still give me the radius. That's where you can choose. But I'll use the first one. I will use the first one. So I wish I erased this with white out. So actually I'm just going to move down here. So now my radius, I'm using distance formula. And I already have it labeled. Or actually, no, I don't. I need the center. So actually, the center is -12.5. And we'll choose the first point. Yeah, we'll use that point. So then we have -14.1. We'll call now this x1, y1, x2, y2. x1, y1, x2, y2. And now we'll plug it into the distance formula to find our radius. So let's see, we're going to have -14 minus a negative makes a +12 plus y2 minus y1 quantity squared. Okay. So if I simplify this, I get -2 squared plus -4 quantity squared. 2 squared is 4. 4 squared is -4 squared. Quantity squared is 16. equals square root of 20. So now we have everything we need. We have the radius and we have our center. Okay, it's a two-step process. First step, midpoint formula. Find your center. Second step, use that center you found and one of the points on the circle to then find your radius. So we're adding one step, midpoint formula, and then go back to what we had done above. Center and a point on a circle. And now we can write our equation of a circle. And we would get, and if it helps you actually, if it helps you, you could say, okay, I'm gonna write down what I have now to work with. My center, my radius, and then you can write the equation of a circle. Okay, so we have x minus a negative is positive, y minus 5 squared equals square root of 20 squared. That leaves me with 20. So this is our final answer. Okay, just breathe, it's okay. So we're doing the same thing as up above, but we're adding one previous step. We've got to find the center first using midpoint, the middle, and then it goes back to our second step, which is like what we had done for 13 through 16. All right, so what I'd like you to do is pause the video, and I want you to first find the midpoint. I want you to first find the center. You're given these two endpoints, label, find your midpoint, which is the center. Do that first. Okay, so pause and first find the center. All right, so here I'm going to label, and my midpoint, I take 6 minus 2, take the average, negative 13 plus 15, take the average. And just so you know, this is the same as saying 6 plus a negative 2. So I am adding my negative 2. And if I simplify it, I find that I get 2, 1. That is my center. Okay, so now what I want you to do is, like over here, we have the center, and you pick one of these points. Pick one of these points to now lead you to finding the radius. Okay, so pause and now try finding the radius. Okay, now I am going to personally, and I'll number that. That was step 1. Step 2, I'm going to use my center, because we have to use the center, or otherwise, by definition, the distance formula doesn't help for radius. And I'm going to use, I'll use negative 2, 15. If you use the other one, you'll get the same answer as what I get, as long as you follow your steps and watch your integers. So I'll have this be x1, y1, x2, y2. So now let's find the radius. So I'm going to have negative 2 minus 2 quantity squared plus 15 minus 1 quantity squared. So that gives me negative 4 quantity squared plus 14 squared when I simplify what's in parentheses. And then I get negative 4 quantity squared is 16. 14 squared is 196. And when you add those together, you get the square root of 212 as your radius. Okay, now we have, once again, our center and we have found the radius. So now I want you to finish this off and write the equation of this circle. All right, so we would get, we found our center to be 2, 1, and the radius is square root of 212. So our final answer is x minus 2 squared plus y minus 1 squared equals square root of 212 squared. Remember, in the equation of a circle, it's radius squared. You get 212. This is our final answer. Okay? All right, now, what I'd like you to do is, for your homework, this worksheet, I'm gonna have you do I haven't had a chance to think about it, so I'm going to let you know in our Google Meet session. Otherwise, it will be posted in Google Classroom. All right, everybody, so keep on the lookout for your homework. And as always, you know how to reach me with any questions. All right, everybody, take care.